Hey everyone, welcome to Quick Brick Games, and today we're going to be talking about the sequel to Traveler's Tales 2005 LEGO Star Wars game, LEGO Star Wars 2: The Original Trilogy. Released in 2006, and as the title suggests, this game focuses on the original trilogy of Star Wars films, now known as A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Now, the first game was sort of released to promote Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith at the time, and covered the prequel trilogy films. With the success of that game, it only made sense to follow up with the originals. Much like the 2005 game, LEGO Star Wars 2 often goes unnoticed or is sort of forgotten due to the later release of LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga in 2007. So hopefully in this video we'll help change that by doing a full retrospective and analysis of LEGO Star Wars 2: The Original Trilogy. So if you've played the first game, LEGO Star Wars 2 is going to feel pretty similar when you boot up the game. You're once again greeted with the classic Star Wars theme and the main menu being in space. This time, when starting a new game, you'll be playing as Princess Leia and Captain Antilles in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Much like Dexter's Diner, the Mos Eisley Cantina acts as the game's hub, which you'll return to again and again throughout the game. Hearing the catchy Cantina music and seeing all the different alien NPC characters hanging out is just a perfect way to set up the atmosphere of the original trilogy. Pretty much all the features from the first game return here, so you can immediately start doing the drop-in, drop-out co-op feature with a friend locally, or of course play solo, which is what we're going to be doing in this video. When you start messing around in the Cantina, you'll probably notice the shop that was in Dexter's Diner returns, but this time it's run by Wooher, I believe is his name, the guy behind the counter. The shop offers all the same things as the first game. You've got your hints, characters, extras, you can enter cheat codes, except now we have a couple of new things. First, we have gold bricks, which you can purchase. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. Second, we have story clips. This allows you to rewatch any of the game's story cutscenes. In the first game, you had to replay the levels in story to see them again, so this is a nice and convenient way to rewatch them here after you've first seen them in the story mode, of course. You'll also find buyable vehicles under the character section of the shop for the new vehicle levels in this game, but we'll talk more about that later as well. Just to the left of the shop, you'll notice this new hologram that counts your total playtime as well as your percentage of the game completed, which I think is a really nice touch. And going over here to the right of the shop, there are two characters in Bacta tanks. A brand new feature of this game is the ability to create up to 2 of your own custom characters. You can customize things like the hair, head, torso, legs, and more to create your own LEGO minifigure from scratch. As you unlock more characters throughout the game, you'll unlock their different pieces to use for your own custom character, so it's pretty neat. I remember using this feature quite a bit playing this game as a kid back when it first came out, but to be honest, I usually don't mess around with the character creator much these days, but I think it is a really cool feature to mess around with in free play if you're ever bored. If we continue over here to the right, a garage door with the Roman numeral 4 will open up with 6 more doors behind it. This is where you can jump into the first level of Episode 4 A New Hope, which is called Secret Plans. Much like the original game, you need to play through each level in story mode before you can jump back in using any character in free play mode. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into Secret Plans. This game's cutscenes are just as good as the first game's, if not better. The graphics definitely improved here on the Xbox 360 version, which is what you're seeing here, so they were able to do a lot more with the cutscenes. Just like the first game, there's no voice acting, but I think the characters mumble a bit more than the first game, but maybe that's just me. Now right off the bat, you're introduced to the new building feature of this game. Anytime you see jumping LEGO objects on the ground, you can hold a button to build something out of them that will help you progress the level or unlock some sort of collectible. Nearly every character in the game has the ability to build except for droid characters. Building these 2 computer panels here will cause the door to open up for you, and you typically get some studs for building too. Now the second door introduces yet another new feature, levers. Again, pretty much any non-droid character can pull on these levers. In some cases like this one, 2 levers will need to be pulled down at the same time, or at least close to the same time to progress. If you're playing solo, usually your AI partner is pretty good at pulling the lever when you need him to. Now, unlike the 2005 game where you're mostly using Jedi characters with lightsabers, in the original trilogy you're going to be using blaster characters quite a bit more. They play mostly the same, except now they have the ability to melee attack. And in this level, you'll soon encounter your first enemies, stormtroopers. If they get too close, using the attack button will now initiate a melee attack, which is pretty handy. Some characters even have their own unique melee attack, like Princess Leia doing this funny slap move. Also, blaster characters can now dodge out of the way from incoming fire, which definitely comes in handy. Later on in this first level, you'll see the return of the grapple feature from the first game. Again, this ability is based on that one short scene in The Phantom Menace, and it keeps coming back. But anyways, afterwards you'll have a short little mini boss fight with Darth Vader, which is pretty cool, and then you'll later be introduced to a new feature, pushable Lego objects. These are often used in different puzzle scenarios throughout the game. Anytime you see this checkerboard floor pattern, that means a Lego object can be pushed along the floor to solve a puzzle or access some new area. Nothing too crazy here, but I think it's a cool mechanic that diversifies the gameplay just a bit. Eventually, you'll be reunited with R2-D2 and C-3PO, who both pretty much function exactly the same as the first game. Their primary use is to hack astromech and protocol droid panels for you. Another new feature this time around is the ability to ride vehicles within the regular on-foot levels, as we'll call them. In this example, since C-3PO can't jump, you can operate this crane in order to lift him up and get him across the gap. It makes for a pretty cool puzzle. Now hold up, we gotta talk about the legendary Rebel Friend character who gets introduced at this part of the level. Just look at the guy in his red outfit. What a great friend. Later on, the level ends where Leia gets captured and the two droids escape to Tatooine. Now, upon completing a level, you'll get a familiar results screen just like the first game, but with some new additions. First, there's now a true Jedi meter for both story and free play modes. This change is awful in my opinion, so now you need to grind filling up that stud meter twice in every level. And second, let's talk about those gold bricks we saw in the Cantina's shop. Each time you complete a level in story, get true Jedi status, or get all 10 mini-kits, you'll be awarded a gold brick. There are 99 gold bricks total in the entire game, 8 of which can be bought outright in the Cantina shop. Gold bricks can then be used to unlock secrets throughout the Cantina, which of course we'll get to later. Lastly, on this results screen, there's a new red power brick collectible to find in every level, in addition to the 10 mini-kits from the first game. Now, what do the red power bricks do? Well, they are pretty much how you get most of the extras in the game now. Before, in the 2005 game, you could just buy all the extras in Dexter's Diner as long as you could afford it. Now you need to get an extras red brick before you can purchase it, so there's sort of an additional obstacle to get the extras now. There's one red power brick to find in each level, and there's 18 main levels this time around, so 18 extras to collect. There's also several extras available for purchase without needing a red brick, but to be honest, those aren't nearly as good or useful. But overall, on the whole, I'd say there's a bit more replayability this time around. You've got to get true Jedi in both free play and story, plus you have a red power brick to find in addition to the 10 mini-kits from before. Luckily, I have guides for all of those collectibles here at QuickBrick Games, so check them out. But alright, let's move on. Like the first game, now you have the option of continuing A New Hope, or you can jump right into level 1 of Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. It's whatever you want to do. Again, I love how they let you jump into whatever movie you want, but for the purposes of this video, I think we're going to stick with the chronological order and start with level 2 through the Junlin Waste. So now we're on Tatooine, where we get to play as the legendary Luke Skywalker. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that the blaster characters now have the ability to dive when you double tap the jump button. I always loved how Luke's dive animation kind of has him stumble a little bit. It looks kind of goofy. And then we also have Ben Kenobi as a playable character, our first Jedi in this game. So now we have access to lightsaber combat and force abilities, which all pretty much work identically to the first game. Except now you can do this Jedi mind trick ability on enemies like Tusken Raiders. I will say Obi-Wan has been given a completely new combat moveset and animations now. In this level, you'll fight your way through waves of Tusken Raiders and eventually reach Jawa Sandcrawler, where you'll rescue R2-D2 and C-3PO. The Jawa enemies are technically harmless, but they can zap droids with their little guns. They're pretty annoying, but overall I like their addition to the game. They definitely spice things up a bit. Also in this level, you may encounter a new double score zone area. These are often secret areas found in free play mode, but some, like this one, are accessible in story mode. As the name suggests, all studs collected in these areas are worth twice as much. I don't know, it seems kind of like a random thing for them to add, but I guess it's cool. Now towards the end of this level, you'll get to drive a land speeder to get across the quicksand, or whatever that's supposed to be. After crossing the quicksand stuff, you'll reach Luke Skywalker's home and get a nice little cutscene. I love Luke messing around with the lightsaber in this one. Next up, we have the Mos Eisley spaceport level. Check out this part of the intro cutscene. It's so great. But anyway, in this one you get to wander around fighting stormtroopers as Luke and Ben Kenobi, One cool part about this level is how you get to build an AT-ST and use it to take out enemies and destroy Lego debris blocking your path. I think it's a really good use of the new vehicle feature in this game. This eventually leads to an in-level version of the Mos Eisley Cantina, where you're introduced to Han Solo and Chewbacca. Han Solo can shoot pretty quickly and has a neat roll move when you're jumping. Chewbacca has his crossbow just like the first game, except this time he has a unique melee animation where he can literally rip off the arms of stormtroopers. It's very cool. I actually remember seeing that in the trailer before the game came out. At the end of this level, when you reach the Millennium Falcon, there's a pretty lame boss fight with the Imperial Spy. He just moves around, calling in different waves of enemies with his weird sound effect. Not too exciting. But alright, moving on to the 4th level, Rescue the Princess. Now we've arrived at the Death Star and we get access to another new feature, disguises. In this case, we can get Stormtrooper helmets, allowing us to access the brand new Stormtrooper door panels. It's fun experimenting with the helmet dispensers with characters that don't have a standard Lego minifigure head, like Chewbacca for instance. The helmet just kind of hangs on the side of his head. It's definitely a nice little detail that TT Games included. One thing I like about this level is how it has these branching paths or hallways as you're moving throughout the Death Star, and a lot more is available to you in free play mode on your second go around. Like the movie, Ben Kenobi splits off from the group, so you lose access to a Jedi character for most of this level. Also, I gotta mention that this level features a double score zone that has a whole bunch of stormtroopers and speedos chilling in a hot tub. You gotta love it. But anyway, eventually you reach Princess Leia, and from there the level ends. Continuing A New Hope with the Death Star Escape level. This level is based again in the Death Star, so the atmosphere is very similar to the last one, but to be honest, this might be my least favorite level from A New Hope, as I'll explain here in a bit. But I did always enjoy the intro cutscene in the trash compactor. Seeing their little Lego heads expand as they're getting crushed is kind of funny. There is just one puzzle towards the beginning of the level where you gotta ride this little vehicle perfectly across the 5 red panels on the floor. I remember getting stuck here as a kid because the game doesn't leave much room for error, and I wasn't even sure if that's what I was supposed to be doing in this section. Let me know in the comments if you had problems with this section as well, or if it was just me. But anyway, what I really don't like about this level is throughout the entire course of it, there's constant infinitely respawning enemies when it comes to the stormtroopers. It's not quite as bad as the beach from Defense of Kashyyyk in the first game, but it's definitely pretty rough. Like when you have to build these grapple hook points on the floor while constantly getting shot at by stormtroopers. I mean, really? And then there's this part where you chase a single stormtrooper down a hallway, and it leads to like a billion stormtroopers in the last room. It's actually pretty impressive that Traveler's Tales was able to get the game to handle that many characters on screen at once. But again, the enemies will continue to respawn. They do give you the option to pull on these levers to close the doors to stop them from coming in, but for some reason it only lasts a few seconds before the doors open right back up, so it's not too helpful. And then the last room again has more enemy spam, but at least this time they only spawn periodically. It's also really cool how you get to see Darth Vader and Ben Kenobi have their little lightsaber duel in the background. But anyways, you end up doing some puzzle solving and escape in the Millennium Falcon as Obi-Wan vanishes into a Force ghost. Alright, the last level for episode 4 is Rebel Attack, which is this game's first vehicle level. To be honest, the controls for these vehicle levels are not very good, but they do offer much more control or freedom compared to the first game's vehicle levels. This time these levels are more from a bird's eye view camera angle. In this one you fly around in an X-Wing taking out enemies. You'll also use these new purple orbs called torpedoes. These are required to destroy certain obstacles to progress through the level or even solve some different puzzles that have to do with the mini-kits. You can hold up to 3 at a time, so you'll often have to return to the different torpedo dispensers around the level to get more. After a few different areas, you'll reach the trench run section, which is pretty fun. Then you get to launch the final torpedo that ultimately blows up the whole Death Star. I'd say this is a solid vehicle level, and that wraps up Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, before we jump into Episode 5, let's talk about these question mark doors around the Cantina. After you get enough gold bricks, you'll gain access to these question mark doors. There's one of these doors for each movie. Inside, you'll find 3 options. There's Super Story, Character Bonus, and Mini-Kit bonus levels. Super Story is where you'll play through all 6 levels for a movie in one sitting. There will be a 1-hour timer and a goal to collect 100,000 studs throughout your playthrough. The 1-hour time limit is pretty easy for episodes 4 and 5, but episode 6 is definitely the longest one. It can be a little bit tricky to do in under an hour. But fortunately, I believe you can pretty much ignore the stud and time limit goals. As long as you just play through the Super Story, you'll get the gold brick reward. Next are the character bonus levels. Here the game throws you into a sort of free play mode where you can freely switch between characters. The goal is to collect 1 million studs within a 5-minute time limit. Luckily the game introduces new purple studs in this mode, which are worth 10,000 studs each. You just gotta make sure to blow up as much stuff as possible while trying not to get killed by the enemies. If you can do it in under 5 minutes, you'll get a gold brick. Last we have mini-kit bonus levels. Like the first game, when you collect all 10 mini-kits in a level, it will build a mini version of a different Star Wars vehicle that's typically based around that level. Now for the first time in these mini-kit bonus levels, you actually get to play as your different mini-kit vehicles. So in a way it gives incentive here to collect more mini-kits so you can use more vehicles in these bonus levels, which I kinda like. The goal here is the same as the character bonus levels, collect 1 million studs in 5 minutes, except this time you're in a vehicle instead of on foot. Doing so will give you another gold brick. So that's pretty much it for the bonus levels. I love how they provide even more content that wasn't there back in the first game. Now I guess while we're here in the Cantina, I can mention that you can venture outdoors from the Cantina, very much like Dexter's Diner, where you'll find the mini-kit builds from each level that we were just talking about. There's also a couple more gold brick builds here that require a hefty amount of gold bricks, but we'll talk more about those towards the end of the video. But for now, let's continue with Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. We start off with Hoth Battle, the next vehicle level in this game. I don't think this one is considered a favorite by most players. You see, the problem with this level is that they introduce what I would consider an annoying new gameplay mechanic for the vehicle levels, the tow bombs. Some vehicles, like the snow speeders, can launch a tow cable to drag these bombs across the map. The issue is that the vehicle controls, as I mentioned earlier, aren't the best, so it's really easy to drag these bombs into various objects, causing them to explode prematurely. These tow bombs are used pretty heavily in this one, as there are several walls blocking your progression that you can only destroy with these bombs. One thing I do like is how you can wrap your tow cable around the AT-AT's legs, just like the movie, but unfortunately you then need a bomb to finish it off before it can get back up. Come on, TT Games. But anyway, the last part of this level takes place in a circular arena where you need to take out several waves of enemies. This section is actually really similar and reminds me of the Jedi battle level from the first game, except this is just more of a vehicle version where you have to take out all these different waves of enemies within a circular location. But I think this one works a little bit better because it's less difficult to find the enemies that you need. For the next level, we stay on Hoth for Escape from Echo Base. Here we mainly play as Han Solo and Leia as we work to escape from the Empire. There's a bit more combat in this one, but it's also very puzzle-based, so I think this is an overall well-rounded level. A lot of the puzzles here use the pushable Lego objects mechanic. I remember playing this level as a kid and getting stuck at this part where you have to use the little vehicle to launch C-3PO to get him up on this ledge. Let me know in the comments again if you got stuck at this part too. There's also this part later on in the level where you slide down this ramp and you have to hit all the pressure pads. But the way the controls are in this level, it can be kind of tricky, and you definitely have to go down at least a couple times in order to hit them all. Eventually you reach the Millennium Falcon where you have to repair it a bit before escaping just before Darth Vader reaches you. What a close one. Moving on to the third level, Episode 5, is another vehicle level, Falcon Flight. In this one you finally get to fly the Millennium Falcon. You start out this one taking out several turrets on these different Star Destroyers. You then move into the famous asteroid field section from the movie. This level can be a little repetitive because you often get blocked by these walls that can only be destroyed with the purple torpedoes, so you'll find yourself constantly having to go back and get more torpedoes from the different asteroids. This probably works better in co-op, I imagine, since your co-op partner can carry their own torpedoes as well. There's actually an optional area in this one where if you fall into this pit, you'll be inside the Space Slug, which also acts as a double score zone. So I thought that was a really cool Easter egg there from the movie. And then at the end of this level, you have to destroy this massive asteroid using several torpedoes, and then we get a cutscene revealing Bounty Hunter Boba Fett. The game then shifts back to Luke Skywalker's perspective, where we land on Dagobah. This is probably one of my favorite levels from this game. You start by playing as Luke in his pilot uniform, where he plays just as a blaster character, and then once you find Yoda, you gain access to a lightsaber, but you can only use the Force when Yoda is on your back. I really like this whole mechanic with Yoda being on your back to use the Force to sort of represent how Luke is being trained. I think it's a pretty cool feature. And speaking of Yoda, he's been altered slightly in this game compared to the original. Unfortunately, he no longer has his hover chair, but I guess that makes sense since he didn't have it in the original Star Wars movies. But man, his movement just isn't as good without it. One really annoying thing about this level are the dreaded bats. These things are always respawning and getting in your way. Why did TT Games feel the need to spam so many of these things? But anyways, eventually Luke will gain full access to the Force without needing Yoda on his back, and then he just pretty much becomes a full-on Jedi class character. You even get to do a mini Darth Vader boss fight here in the cave, just like the movie, but instead of Luke's head being inside Darth Vader's helmet, he just kind of disappears at the end of the fight. I guess they got to keep that E10 plus rating. But later on in the level, in order to get Luke's X-Wing out of the water, you need to use Yoda's Force abilities to do it. I thought this was a nice nod to the movie since Luke isn't powerful enough to lift it just yet, and then the ending cutscene reveals the Ben Kenobi Force Ghost, and then we're off to the next level. Alright, level 5 is called Cloud City Trap. Another great one in my opinion. This takes place during one of the most iconic scenes from all of Star Wars with Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader on Bespin. The only thing I don't like about this one is all the Stormtrooper enemy spam. It just feels kind of unnecessary how they're literally spawning from the sky within a closed-in room in this example. Also, I imagine this level is pretty boring in co-op since your partner will be stuck playing as R2-D2 the entire time, but at least R2 has a significant amount of stuff to do during the fight. And this really is a solid boss fight because there's just so much variety throughout the level. Like in this room, you're alternating between fighting Vader and Stormtroopers, and in this one, you have to use the Force to throw Lego objects back at him. This part actually kind of reminds me of the beginning section of the Darth Maul level from the first game. But once you reach the end and take down all of Vader's health, you get the famous I am your father scene, but in Lego fashion without voice acting. Since there's no voice acting, Vader has to show Luke a family photo of him as Anakin, and you see the pregnant Padme Lego there as well. This is such a clever scene that's not really as good when you put voice acting in there, in my opinion. But anyway, that's it for Cloud City Trap. The final level of Empire Strikes Back is Betrayal over Bespin. Here we get to play as Lando for the first time as we escape from the Empire. I don't have too much to say about this one. It's a solid blaster character level. It's pretty combat heavy as you fight your way through Stormtroopers while periodically needing to switch to either R2 or C-3PO to progress. There's even a little Boba Fett boss fight here, which I thought was neat. The level ends with a final stand by the Millennium Falcon where you gotta take out several waves of Stormtroopers. It definitely gets pretty hectic. But overall, that's pretty much it for the Empire Strikes Back. And then by this point, you'll probably have noticed if you played the first game that the levels here are significantly longer. Probably 2 to 3 times longer, I'd say, which I think makes for a solid length to this game. It definitely gives you a lot more content to play. And also, every movie here has 6 levels, unlike the first game where Attack of the Clones oddly only had 5. But alright, let's continue on with the final movie of this game, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. We start off in Jabba's palace, where we primarily play as Princess Leia. Except this time you'll find these Bosch, I think is how you say it, helmet dispensers. This allows you to access new bounty hunter panels. Not only do they have the ability to access these bounty hunter door panels, but they can also throw detonators capable of destroying silver Lego objects, which you might have seen throughout the game in some of the levels. And while we're talking about character classes, one interesting thing here about LEGO Star Wars 2 is that they actually removed the high jumping character class. Remember in the first game when you could play as characters like Jar Jar Binks to reach high ledges? Those are pretty much gone this time around. Just thought that was kind of interesting. But anyways, we end up meeting with Luke, now with a green lightsaber and full-on Jedi robes. We also have the new Gamorrean guard enemies, which can be kind of annoying to fight. They often block a lot of your attacks. Luckily, Luke has the ability to force choke them to essentially instant kill them, so I definitely recommend using that ability. Once we rescue Han Solo from Carbonite, we get to do a Rancor boss fight. The Rancor just has 3 hearts. You get to use the Gamorrean guards as bait, as well as the droid characters to help out, so I'd say this is a pretty solid boss fight with lots of different character abilities being used. Alright, let's move on to the Great Pit of Carkoon level. I gotta say, the opening cutscene to this one is probably one of my favorites, with how Luke is just kind of playing around on the diving board. Now at the beginning of the level, you'll be moving across these ships, and you'll start the Boba Fett boss fight. This is a sort of mini boss fight, I'd say, as he doesn't take too long to take down. The Sarlacc pit even does a nice burp after you've taken him out. But anyway, you'll be moving across the sand barge, which is surprisingly huge, with some minor puzzles to solve to get inside. One of the cool parts once you get inside is how they have this disco party section. This is a nice callback to the first game where there was that disco inside the Camino clothing facility. Back then it was more of an optional Easter egg, but here it's straight up required to progress. You'll eventually get to the top of the sand barge where you'll use this turret to shoot a couple of targets, and then that pretty much wraps up this level. Next we arrive on Endor for Speeder Showdown. I think this level might be a bit controversial among the player base. We play as Luke and Leia, and after a brief opening section, the majority of this level takes place on speeders, which I think a lot of the players find to be boring. The speeder sections here have you go in the same big loop until you take out all the enemies. Once you do that, you stop at these different locations where you need to destroy one of these shield generators to progress. Each time you'll be taking over or building an ATST which you use to destroy the shield generators. After doing that a few times, you'll finally reach this last area where you actually get to hijack an AT-AT and destroy more shield generator things. It's not super exciting, but still, it's a fun way to end off this level being in this massive AT-AT. Overall, I think this is a pretty unique level that definitely changes up the gameplay a bit. Next up, we have the Battle of Endor, which is a fairly lengthy level where you have a large group of characters to play as. You're also introduced to the Ewok Wicket, who is a small character type, which was a character type from the first game that we haven't really seen yet in this one. You start off in the Ewok village in the trees and kind of make your way down to the ground, where you'll fight waves of stormtroopers and solve puzzles to progress. After this cool catapult section, you get to hijack an ATST, cause lots of chaos as you take out all the enemies surrounding the bunker. It's a good time. Inside the bunker, there's two different rooms to your left and right where you got to pull some levers to lower more force fields. Eventually, when the force field is down, you plant some bombs, and the level ends with the entire bunker being blown up. Nice. Alright, now we get to talk about what I consider to be the best level of Episode 6, Jedi Destiny. This is it. This is the final showdown between Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and the Emperor. What I like about this level is that it takes place after Luke has convinced his father to turn good, so throughout the level you actually get to play as both Luke and Vader against Palpatine, which I think definitely makes for a fun co-op experience. And of course, playing as Darth Vader, that gives you access to the Dark Side character class, which returns from the first game. And I love how they gave the Emperor like almost 20 hearts. It really makes this feel like the final boss of Star Wars. And I gotta say, the fight is pretty good. It kind of moves all across the Emperor's chambers with quite a bit of variety. For example, like some of the boss fights in the first game, Palpatine will often target you with the Force, and then you'll need to switch to your co-op partner to hit him. Or there's a part where Palpatine electrocutes the floor and you need to carefully walk along the non-electrocuted path. Or you fight the Emperor's Royal Guards, which are a pretty tough enemy, by the way. There's just loads of variety to break up like the main boss fight with Palpatine, which is awesome. And then when you're playing this level in free play, there's surprisingly a lot of hidden rooms throughout the sides of this level to revisit, so I definitely recommend doing that as well. Anyways, you take down Palpatine, you get this epic cutscene, and finish up the game. Well, not quite, because we actually have one more level to go. We still need to blow up the second Death Star. So that leads us to, last but not least, into the Death Star. This is the last vehicle level where we play as Lando in the Millennium Falcon. Much like the Falcon flight level, we begin by having to take out several different Star Destroyers, but this time you need to destroy them with the purple torpedoes. I find this part to be kind of annoying because you can only get the torpedoes by destroying enemies that have them, and sometimes, at least in my experience, it can take forever to even find an enemy that has them in the first place. I really wish there was a torpedo dispenser for this part. I definitely think it would speed things up a bit. But anyways, after that part, you get to go inside the Death Star, where you do get some torpedo dispensers this time, which is nice. At the Death Star's core, you destroy these little zapping turrets. Does anybody else find these things to be super annoying? Because I definitely do. They can kind of get you in a lock where you just keep getting zapped over and over again. You can't really do much about it. But anyways, once you destroy them, you can send a torpedo at the core to cause a massive explosion, blowing up the entire Death Star too. And then there's this final sequence where you need to fly away from the explosion and towards the camera, which I think makes for a really cool final sequence of the game. And with that, that concludes Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. It's definitely the longest of the 3 movies. Alright, so that's all the main levels in this game, but there's still some miscellaneous stuff around the Cantina that we need to talk about. First, let's talk about some of the new stuff in the shop. There's the new score multiplier extras that are insanely expensive, but allow you to multiply your stud count. These can be stacked together as well, multiplying all studs in the game by a max of 3,840 studs, which is pretty insane. Unfortunately, they're so expensive that it's very unlikely that you'll have enough studs to afford them, even after 100% completing everything else in the game. There's also the Use Old Save extra, which if you have a save file from the original 2005 game on your console, you can play as the prequel era characters from the first game in this one. I've actually learned through making these videos that a lot of people weren't aware of this in LEGO Star Wars 2, so I've made an entire video talking about this feature. I go into a lot more detail there, so definitely check it out if you're curious. LEGO Star Wars 2 also has these new expensive ghost characters for Ben Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Yoda, What's great about them is that they're invisible, so enemies won't attack you and you can't take damage. Definitely a cool thing to save up your studs for. Another thing in the Cantina is this door with Jabba the Hutt's face on it. To unlock it, you need to purchase every Bounty Hunter class character in the game from the shop. Inside, you'll get to do Bounty Hunter missions, which is a brand new feature of LEGO Star Wars 2. These are 10 fairly short missions where you get to play as the bounty hunters across some of the game's already existing levels. The goal here is to find a character hidden somewhere in the level within the time limit. These can be completed fairly quickly, but I think it is a fun idea that adds more content to the game, which is always good, plus you get a gold brick for each one. Speaking of gold bricks, what about those 2 gold brick piles outside of the Cantina that I mentioned earlier? The first one requires 60 gold bricks and unlocks the LEGO City level. This bonus level throws you into a generic LEGO city where the goal is to collect 1 million studs. There's essentially exactly 1 million studs in the level, so you literally need to destroy every little thing possible to complete it. Fortunately, there is no time limit to worry about here. Personally, I don't find this level to be that fun because there's always one small thing that you didn't destroy, so you end up spending forever trying to hunt it down and get the last few studs. You don't get any reward for completing this level, but it does increase your overall completion percentage. Alright, now for the final gold brick build that requires all 99 gold bricks to build. What could it possibly be? Well, it builds a very sophisticated and detailed stud fountain that pumps out endless amounts of studs. You might find this to be useless at this point of the game, because why would you need more studs? But it's likely not, because you can hang out around this stud fountain to grind enough studs to purchase all of those expensive stud multiplier extras. In my experience, the only use of the stud multipliers in this game is to help you purchase the other more expensive stud multipliers, so they're really not the most useful thing in the world. But alright, so we've pretty much covered every aspect of LEGO Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. So in conclusion, LEGO Star Wars 2 brings everything from LEGO Star Wars the video game and takes it up to the next level. The levels are longer, there's tons of new gameplay mechanics, we have building, levers, bounty hunter characters, bounty hunter missions, a character creator, red power brick collectibles, new vehicle levels, and so much more. This game is really jam-packed with content, especially in comparison with the original game. Personally, I do prefer the setting of the first game, where it's the prequels, you have a lot more Jedi and lightsaber duels to engage in, but gameplay and feature-wise, LEGO Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, is just better in every way, and it's still fun to this day, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet. So guys, that's going to do it for my retrospective and analysis of 2006's LEGO Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. Let me know in the comments if you've played this game, or maybe you've just played the complete saga and want to go back and play it. This game is backwards compatible on the modern Xbox consoles, so it's definitely easy to play, I'd say, compared to the first game. But yeah, like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not, and subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you guys next time here on Quick Break Games.